This is a study that I'm working on with Oded Mikdosi and Hannah Ayalon from Tel Aviv University. And we are examining ethno-religious differences in Israeli education system, and we look at both vertical and horizontal dimensions, and I will just explain what are those dimensions. First, we know that higher education system have expanded all around the developed world in the last 2 or 3 decades. We also know that privileged social groups take advantage of the differentiation within higher education, and this is the horizontal dimension of differentiation or stratification in higher education. But there are 2 sources of stratification within higher education: the type of institution and the fields of study. And we know that there are both selective and unselective institutions in higher education, and selective and unselective fields of study in higher education. And we bring a new solution in order to combine these 2 sources of stratification in higher education, in terms of methodology. Previous research shows that members of underprivileged groups enroll more often in less prestigious and less selective institutions. And we have mixed results about the fields of study. We have few studies that show that privileged groups enjoy advantages in fields of study, and we have other that show otherwise. So the results are not in one direction, at least until now. Our focus in this study is ethno-religious, vertical, that is access to higher education, and horizontal inequality, that is institutions and fields of study in the expanded Israeli higher education system. The Israeli higher education system has expanded dramatically in the last 2.5 decades from a system that was based on 6 research universities. It now consists of more than 30 institutions. All of the new institutions are less selective colleges, some of them private and some of them public. We have several mechanisms that explain education inequality in general and education inequality in higher education. The main mechanisms are family resources. We talked about a lot about this mechanism today. High school tracking. We haven't talked about it today, but this is one of the main reasons for educational inequality in secondary education. Admission policies of higher education institutions, and regarding fields of study, this is again the question of selective versus non-selective institutions of fields of study. And another important mechanism is choice, whether rational or not rational, but choice, the way people choose where to go within higher education is a very important question. Some relevant characteristics of the Israeli secondary education. First of all, we heard that there is separation between Arab and Jewish schools, and we heard about the difference in allocations. The secondary education system in Israel is extensively tracked. There are academic and vocational tracks, and there is also stratification within academic and vocational tracks. Both vocational and academic tracks can be very different. And also there is within subject differentiation, mainly in mathematics and English, in the Bagrut, the matriculation examinations. This is very important because the main criterion for entering higher education is the matriculation diploma. Okay, so I talked about this, I'll move on. Some words about the demography in Israel. We have two main groups. The Jewish group is about 80% of the total population, and within the Jewish group, we can distinguish between different origin group. The first one is Jews of European origin, Ashkenazim, which is the dominant ethnic group in Israel. The second is Jews from Middle Eastern or North African origin, the Mizrahim, the underprivileged social group. There is a growing group of mixed origin, mixed ethnicity, Mizrahim and Ashkenazim. And we have two main new immigrant population, one from the former Soviet Union, a very big one, and a much smaller one of new immigrants from Ethiopia, which we do not include in this study because the numbers are very, very small. And the Palestinian Arab group is also very diverse. It contains a large Muslim majority, about 80% of the population, and two small minorities within the minority, one of Jews and one of Christians. Each one of them is about 10% of the Palestinian Arab minority. We used data from several sources, only administrative data. We don't have data that was collected using surveys. I mean, one of them was collected using a survey, but it wasn't a survey that was initiated in order to collect data to understand processes in higher education. The first one is the population census, which provides data on the socioeconomic status of the family while our subjects were in high school. The Ministry of Education, from which we have data on matriculation diploma. The National Institute for Testing and Evaluation, from which we have the data on the psychometric test, which is one of the criteria to entering higher education, and information from tertiary education institutions about enrollment and the field of study. This data set includes information on a representative sample of about 20% of all Israelis born between 78 and 82. We focus only on high school graduates who are eligible for the matriculation diploma. That is only those who can enter higher education. So we focus only on the transition from secondary education to higher education for those who can make this transition. But to control for possible sample selection bias, we also conducted a preliminary probability regression analysis for matriculation eligibility, and we use what is called the Hickman Correction. Our dependent variable is an ordinal variable that includes 4 categories. The first is did not enroll, and the other 3 are based on detailed information from the Central Bureau of Statistics about the returns in the labor market for different fields of study within different institutions. So we have about 400 combinations of fields of study and institutions, and we have predictions for wages in the labor market for people who were graduated from these fields of study in the different institutions. So we combine the 2 sources of certification in higher education into one dependent variable, and we also combine the vertical and the horizontal dimensions into one ordinal dependent variable. So we have 3 categories of income: low, medium, and high. Of course, we don't know the actual earning of each of the person in the data set. We only know the predicted income in the labor market when they will be graduated from the higher education institution.
How many years after they graduate?
It's 5 years, right, Dimitri? About up to 5 years, only for the first degree. So it's rather limited, but we think it's a good proxy for the value of higher education. And another important thing is we connect between educational processes and inequality in the labor market and society in general. Our explanatory variables include the ethno-religious group, which is the main variable. Socioeconomic background includes number of siblings, standard of living. It is based on appliances, mainly electric appliances in the household, and parental academic education. We also know from the matriculation examination what was the specialization during high school, and we differentiate between the exact and the natural sciences, which is the most prestigious track in the Israeli secondary education system, humanities and social sciences, and technological and vocational subjects. And we also look at the achievement on the criteria for admission, the matriculation score, the average score on the matriculation, and the psychometric score. The psychometric score is equivalent to the SAT to some extent. Let's look for a minute or two on the descriptive statistics of enrollment in higher education according to expected income by ethno-religious groups. We see very large differences between the ethno-religious groups in terms of enrollment in higher education. We can see that among Ashkenazim, about only 1/4 did not enroll in higher education, while among the Arab population, about half of the population did not enroll in higher education. But we can also see very big differences in the highest level of income, and we see that the privileged groups are also privileged in terms of access to fields of study or academic programs that lead to higher income in the labor market. We can see that on average, Jews have much higher representation in the highest level of income in comparison to Arabs. Next, we examined these enrollment patterns using generalized ordered logit models. I will skip the coefficients and go directly to the predicted probabilities. These are predicted probabilities for enrollment in higher education for an average person. An average person is not exactly an average person, but we defined an average person, someone who specialized in high school in the natural sciences and was average and had parents with higher education and was on the mean of all other continuous variables. So it's not an average person, it's a strong average person. It's someone who is average on the social dimension, but is strong on the academic dimension. And we, again, after controlling for all of these variables, we see very big differences between the different ethno-religious groups. We also average the gender. Statistically, we can do that. Yeah, we also have different predictions for males and women, and we have some very nice findings, but I have only 5 minutes, so I will probably not get into them. First, we see that the pattern that we saw earlier here in the descriptive statistics remains largely the same here. We see that the Arab groups, Muslim and Druze and Christians, have much higher odds of not entering higher education. And we see that Muslim and Druze and Christians have much higher odds of entering the academic programs that lead to lower income in the labor market. These are confidence intervals for those interested. Looking at the higher income category, again, we see that the Arab population is much lower, has much lower probabilities of entering these academic programs, and the group with the highest probabilities of entering the high income category is immigrants from the former Soviet Union, although immigrants from the former Soviet Union have higher odds of not entering higher education. So regarding the new immigrants from the former Soviet Union, we have a split pattern. On the one hand, they enroll less in higher education in comparison to the veteran Jewish groups, but on the other hand, they have the highest odds of enrolling on the most selective, most prestigious academic programs. Yes, yes. The differences here are very, very small and on the border of significance. But yes, when we control for all the background variables, the socioeconomic variables, and the academic variables, we see no differences between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim, but I remind you that we saw differences, some differences here. For example, Mizrahim versus Ashkenazim, which means that part of this, and mainly the biggest gap is here regarding enrollment in favor of Ashkenazim. So this means that we can locate the mechanism that is responsible for the gap between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim, and this is both socioeconomic background and academic opportunities in high school, mainly differences in choice or tracking in high school. But we also see, and I will move to the conclusions, we also see that the disadvantage of the Arab population is not explained by the socioeconomic difference and the achievement on the psychometric test and the Bagrut, and the advantage of the former Soviet Union immigrants in entering the most lucrative academic program is also not explained by their background. They have, on average, very high parental education, but this does not explain their advantage in higher education. So in both cases, regarding the Arab population and regarding the immigrants from the former Soviet Union, we cannot examine it with our data, but we can speculate that this is based on choice. On choice, Arab choose less to enter higher education and to enter the most lucrative academic programs because they have good reason to believe that they will be discriminated against in the labor market. On the other hand, new immigrants from the former Soviet Union don't have the same problem of discrimination in the labor market, and they can use or take advantage of their high, for some of them, the high academic achievement in order to have social and economic mobility through the channel of higher education. So let's just conclude very briefly. Inequality between Ashkenazim and Mizrahim is mainly due to high school history and achievements in the criteria for admission. The disadvantage of Arab and FSU immigrants remains after controlling for socioeconomic background, high school history, and achievements regarding the vertical dimension. Regarding the horizontal dimension, the advantage of former Soviet Union immigrants, Mizrahim, and ethnically mixed over Ashkenazim in studying lucrative fields, and disadvantage of the Arab groups. Arabs are disadvantaged in the two dimensions after controlling on the socioeconomic status and the high school history, and the disadvantage of the historically underprivileged Jewish ethnic groups persists only in the vertical dimension and is mainly due to educational processes. Former Soviet Union immigrants are disadvantaged in the vertical dimension, but advantaged in the horizontal one. Thank you.
Thanks, Yariv, for a very sort of stimulating talk. I was very surprised by the figures for the Christian Arabs, and I wondered about the measurement, whether the not in higher education means they're not in a higher education institution in Israel, or they never had higher education. There is a growing phenomena of Palestinian Arabs of going to Jordan or to other countries for obtaining higher education, which says something about the system here, nonetheless. But,
yes.
but they would appear later on as higher education. So does that mean that they're actually just simply not in one of Israel's institutions?
Exactly. This is a very important comment. We only have information about enrollment in Israel. So our measurements of enrollment, mainly regarding the Arab population, are biased. Because we still don't have this information, we cannot estimate the bias, but we know it is biased. But I think this is not the explanation regarding the Christians, because most of those who go to study in Jordan, for example, are Muslims. Yeah, but there is an explanation for this disadvantage. But first, I should remind you that here, the situation of the Christian is better than this of the Muslims and Druze. Very small. But when we control, when we take into account all other variables, and mainly the correction for attaining the matriculation eligibility, we get this result.
Just one question. Did you include the academic colleges for teachers?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
we did not. Okay, we did not include the ultra-Orthodox population. We excluded the ultra-Orthodox population according to the high school.
So there may be one more source of sensitivity bias, because academic colleges didn't require psychometric exams. Okay. Yeah. Academic colleges, unlike the universities, did not require psychometric exams. So you have some missing data for probably most highly paid
I think
graduates.
that today they do require. Today they do require, no? Today. But for this cohort, I'm not sure. Most of them took the psychometric test. Dimitri, most of them took the psychometric test. We have a psychometric score for most of those who attended the teacher colleges. And we also have people who did not take the psychometric test in the universities.
Do you have a separate slide for men and women?
No, not here.
Can you say something
Yes,
about it?
I can say something. here. The difference here between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim is insignificant for men, but is significant for women. That is, Mizrahi women do have an advantage over over Ashkenazi women in the odds of enrolling in the most lucrative fields of study, while among men there is no difference. In the Arab population, there are differences. In general, Arab men enroll in much higher rates in higher education, but here you don't see a big difference. We have another paper about the intersections of gender and ethno-religious group, and I can send it to you.
Yariv, thank you for that excellent presentation. My question is as follows. Sort of standing back and looking at the numbers that you presented, what do you sort of see here as the moral of the story? I mean, sort of looking back, what do we take away from this? What are our big takeaways?
Yeah, we have just received such a comment from a reviewer, so I'm prepared. No, it was okay. So it wasn't you, okay. I think we have here the regular combination of several mechanisms. We have the effect of family resources. We have the effect of high school history. We have the effect of admission policies, and we have the effect of choice. Regarding Arabs and former Soviet Union immigrants, we think that choice is a very important mechanism to different directions. And regarding the difference between Ashkenazim and Mizrahim, the high school history or high school story or history is still very relevant. Yossi published 25 years ago a very important paper about it, and it's still very relevant. Okay.
I have two comments that I think that are more methodological flavor. The first one about the former Soviet Union. You showed that there were less enrolled than others.
Yeah.
And then within those that were enrolled, they were in higher, more attractive places, which raises the issue about within group variability. Yeah. And I think that that's one issue that we have to remember. We clump them all together, and we know that they are not the same. However, even the Ashkenazim are not the same. Shh, don't tell anyone. So I think that that's something that we have to remember in future studies. Yeah. The other thing is, in a way, relevant. I can understand the statistical reasoning of controlling for the background that led you not to get matriculation, and then as if it doesn't exist. But we have to understand that statistics and life are not always the same. And in fact, you were pulling out a very specialized subgroup, and they were more differentiated, for instance, for Mizrahim than for Ashkenazim, in the sense that nature or whatever, the experiment picked up certain subgroups. Within these subgroups, we don't know exactly who are these subgroups that did not make it or made it to the... so I think that the general idea of comparing Mizrahim and Ashkenazim, we have to realize that we are not talking about Ashkenazim and Mizrahim. We have to keep saying within those that were able to, then we don't see this, which is meaningful, but it's different than the general story.
I agree with both comments. I agree. We tell the story of those who completed high school with the ability to proceed to higher education. This is our story. There is a bigger story of those who did not make it in terms of attaining the matriculation diploma.
If this is a story, why did you control for the background?
No, we control for the socioeconomic background.
Why would you? If you're telling the story...
because there are differences.
But that's part of the story. It's not an irrelevant part of the story. By controlling, you're actually distorting the story. You're not telling the story. Because one of the things that
with this comment, I do not agree.
Okay. That's okay.
the correlation between matriculation scores and psychometric scores vary between ethnic groups. And in some cases, they vary substantially. I beg your pardon? Is it a myth? You think it's a myth? Okay, I withdraw my question.
Okay. I agree that also in our study, we have the correlation for each group, and there aren't much differences.
I just had one small suggestion in response to Rami's concern. When you have that graph, you could do that graph without the controls, but then have they be the full bars, and then have a part of each graph that said, what does it look like after you control for those, which would tell you about, you know, how important are these mechanisms in explaining this.
Okay, yeah.
The high percentage of Arab students in the teacher education colleges. I mean, we know that, you know, they are overrepresented in these colleges. So
most of those students are in the teacher preparing colleges.
No, my question is whether it would be differs if you control, for example, you know, like of distance, you know, from like distance from these universities where they are located, because you know we know that more than 90% of the 99% of these, like in the teacher education colleges, are you know, like are women. So
the geographical distance.
Exactly, yeah, the geographical.
We don't have this information. We don't have this information.
Okay, last one.
One probably technical question. Do you have any data about those Israeli kids who complete their matriculation exams 5 years after age 18? Because there are many opportunities for second chances, like pre-university programs, and redoing one or two of the matriculation exams. Do you have anything about it?
Yes. Our cohort was born here. We use data from the first decade of the 2000s. So if they completed, they returned to some private school to complete their matriculation, and they got a matriculation diploma, then it's there. If not...
So for the kids of 82, by the age of 25, some of them return to do one more exam.
Yes, so we have this information.
Okay, one very last question.
It's actually a question for the future. Israel has a history of studying these ethnic differences. Some of these are sort of very small now. With the capacity to merge data, could you think of doing this with income differences?
Yeah.
Because it would seem that some of the things we were talking about would say that, you know, what's now maybe more important even than ethnicity would be the income.
First of all, we are now working on a project that looks at graduating from higher education, first degree, bachelor's degree. And we hope to get more money and to merge more information from labor market in 2 or 3 years. So if you sit in one of these committees, to go back to the parents. Okay.